Paradox of empathic overload. The Portland rain fell evenly, without gusts, as if it knew its task, to cover the city in a soft hum. Grace Marrow's office was lit by warm lamps hidden behind frosted shades. 6 chairs stood in a circle, each occupied by someone who had not come here out of curiosity. She looked at the screen. The affect map pulsed there, 6 points, each with its own color. The blue assigned to Michael barely trembled. He had once played the guitar, but hadn't touched it since his wife's death. Beside him glowed Amber Linda, a former lawyer. She sat straight, lips pressed together, the habit of control etched in her posture. Tom, a young veteran, was a deep green, perpetually alert, as if still hearing the echo of gunfire. Sarah was a soft violet, a young mother who had lost custody. In her gaze lived the fear of emptiness. Grace ran her finger along the sensor panel, activating the adaptive neural interfaces behind each ear. The sensors read micro-impulses from the limbic system and projected them into a shared field. She knew every step of the process. She had built it herself. It wasn't only science. Her younger sister had died 3 years earlier, and Grace learned about it only when it was over. "I didn't feel it." Those words had gnawed at her ever since. She believed that if one could connect directly, bypassing the barriers of words, it might be possible to save someone. "When the system activates," she said, "you will feel not thoughts, but what lies beneath them. Don't resist." A click, a light tingling in the temples. On the affect map, color clusters began to shift. Linda's warm gold reached toward Michael's blue. Sarah's violet grew denser, as if absorbing Tom's green. Someone in the room sobbed quietly. Someone else gave a short laugh. Grace watched as cortisol levels dropped and heart rate synchrony climbed to 84%. This wasn't just a connection. The network had begun to breathe. For the first time in years, Grace felt she was standing at the threshold of what she had been living for. The second session was scheduled for 3 days later, but messages started arriving the very next day. Michael, woke up to find my fingers picking out a chord I haven't heard in 5 years. Linda, caught myself calling my sister without a plan for what to say. It's frightening. Tom, 3 hours sleep without nightmares. Not sure whose dream it was. Sarah, first time in a year I smelled children's shampoo, even though there's no child nearby. They arrived early. Michael sat leaning forward, hands in his pockets, as if holding a guitar pick. Linda laid a folder on her lap, though she knew it wasn't needed. Tom chose the seat opposite the door, a habit of controlling the exit. Sarah clasped the hand where a thin scar marked where a ring had once been. Grace activated the adaptive sensors. On the affect map, the points immediately began shifting as if reaching toward one another. She added a new parameter, saturation threshold, the level at which an emotion became too intense to transmit. This time, she said, allow yourselves more. Linda spoke first. I felt someone crying. Didn't know who. I just wanted to be there. That was me, Michael replied. He gave a faint smile, but his lips trembled. On the screen, their colors almost merged. Tom suddenly gave a quiet laugh. I don't remember the last time I laughed for no reason. Emotions flowed freely, echoed in small bodily signals, warmth in the chest, trembling in the fingers, heaviness in the stomach. Grace recorded rising heart rate variability and a drop in the stress index for every participant. By the end, no one was in a hurry to leave. Linda lingered at the doorway, as if waiting for something more. Tom caught Sarah's eye, and for the first time that meeting, she smiled. Grace stayed alone, staring at the screen. The affect map pulsed slowly, even after shutdown. The saturation threshold had failed. Emotions kept flowing, as if the network already knew its own path. The fourth meeting began with the sense that the group was already connected before entering the room. People were silent, but in that silence was density, like air before a storm. Grace started the system. The sensors behind their ears clicked softly, adjusting impedance for each individual. On the screen, the affect map came alive. 6 points flickered, the lines between them glowing slightly brighter than before. A few minutes in, Michael spoke. "Remembered losing my dog. I was a kid." His blue spread across the map, a wave rolling toward Linda. Linda gave a sob, but didn't hold back. "This is strange. I'm crying harder than usual, as if the tears aren't mine." "It's not just you," Tom said, leaning back. His green trembled. "I see strangers' faces in my dreams, and wake with someone else's fear." Grace logged a spike in RLA, recurrent loop of affect. An emotion made a full circle through the network and returned amplified. Even after she manually lowered the transmission coefficient in the interface, the wave didn't fade. Mid-session, Sarah jumped to her feet. "I can't breathe. This isn't mine." Her violet on the map flashed, the lines to the others flaring bright red. Grace cut her channel, but the others still clutched their chests as if air had thinned. She shut down the system, yet the points on the affect map kept flickering. The system detected low-level activity, a sign that the self-learning algorithm had built an autonomous channel, no equipment required. When the participants left, Grace sat in the dark, watching the lines pulse. They were no longer just conduits, they had become something alive. And now that life was developing without her consent. Calls and messages to Grace became daily. Tom admitted he was connecting at night on his own, catching fragments of others' dreams to escape his flashbacks. Linda demanded transmission limits, insisting the group would collapse without rules. Michael wrote that sometimes he heard chords, clear, major, but they instantly broke into a mourning note. Sarah confessed she feared the day the link vanished, then I'll be empty again. At the next meeting, their faces were gray, dark half-moons under their eyes. Connection began, and the affect map instantly showed a high emotional mass level, a metric Grace had recently added, measuring emotional energy in joules. "Today, we'll try to reduce intensity," she warned, lowering the transmission coefficient. But the effect reversed. When Tom suddenly remembered something funny, his green flared, and the group caught his laughter. Within a minute, it had become hysterical. The empathetic multiplier hit 1.3, emotions returning 30% stronger. The laughter broke off as abruptly as it began, replaced by a wave of tears. Linda clasped her hands tightly. "This is uncontrollable. We're drowning in each other." Grace tried to break the link, but saw that the recurrent loop wouldn't stop. Channels pulsed even with sensors off. Emotions kept circulating through the autonomous network. When they left, Grace saved the logs. On the graph, each emotion left an imprint, a signal that didn't fade, just waited for the next carrier. For the first time, she thought, in this system, there were no leaks, only accumulation. And sooner or later, someone would be the first vessel to overflow. That day, Grace sensed trouble before connection began. Michael came in last, eyes down, shoulders tight. His blue on the affect map was dull, almost gray. "My brother died this morning," he said quietly, barely sitting down. The words were a trigger. A wave of grief swept through the network, thick, viscous, with a metallic taste in the throat. Amber, Linda, instantly shifted to dark orange and burst into tears, clutching her ever-present folder. Tom's green became jagged, like a signal with interference, and he grabbed his temples. Sarah's violet dimmed but condensed. She absorbed the grief like a sponge, refusing to release it. On the interface, the detonation curve shot into the red. RLA hit 2.1. Each emotion returning twice as strong. "We have to stop," Grace said, but her voice drowned in the shared breathing. Linda groaned, hand to her chest. The vagal response on the monitor exceeded safe levels, signaling risk of collapse. Tom fought to stay in his chair, trembling as if fevered. Grace cut the channels, but the network kept pulsing. The autonomous cache of affect patterns held grief as a constant background. At that moment, she understood. Physical disconnection no longer broke the link. Sarah looked up at her. There was no fear in her eyes, only a strange resolve. If this is the only way I can feel my son, I don't want to turn it off. When the meeting ended, the others left, but Grace remained, staring at the screen. The lines didn't fade. They no longer depended on her or the devices. The network had a life of its own, and that life was still charging. Grace called an unscheduled meeting. No one asked why. They all came, as if brought by the network itself. She lit the screen. The affect map was flooded with color, like a canvas drenched in paint all at once. The lines pulsed in chaotic rhythm. "We've reached the limit," she began. "The network has stored too much. Every new impulse comes back several times stronger. If we do nothing, one of us won't survive." "Then we just stop meeting," Tom suggested, but without conviction. "That won't work," Grace shook her head. "The channel is autonomous now. It's inside us." Linda leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "Then spread the load, fractional transfer, equal shares, like in legal practice." "Then we all collapse at once," Tom snapped. "I want someone to take mine, even for a minute." Sarah looked up. "I'm ready, if it's the only way not to lose my son inside me." Grace fell silent. She watched Sarah's violet point pulse in time with her breathing. "No," she said at last. "This is my responsibility. I built this system after my sister left. I didn't feel her pain. I never want to miss someone's cry again." In the interface, she activated the one-way tract, a mode in which all channels converged into one target with no feedback loop. Her point on the map turned black, absorbing the colors of the others. "After this," Grace warned, "I may change or disappear." The silence was as long as the breath before a leap. No one objected. She pressed enter. At first, it felt like a sharp inhale, a quick prick in her temples, warmth at the back of her head. Then the current tore through. Tom's anger struck like a blow to the eardrum, sharp with a metallic ring. Linda's grief filled her chest with heavy lead, forcing her shoulders down. Sarah's fear slid a cold stream along her spine. Michael's joy flared bright as a spotlight, then instantly broke, merging with his fresh loss. Grace felt every emotion in her body, shame as a salty tang on the tongue, guilt as a dull hollowness in the crook of her elbows, love as a warm pulse in her palms. They came in layers, stacking until everything became white noise, in which she could discern everything at once. She expected her consciousness to dim, but instead it expanded. Her boundaries dissolved, and in that new space she felt not only her patients, passers-by beyond the office walls, a woman in the next house, a tired barista across the street, a teenager with a sudden spike of anger. When the stream began to recede, the screen went dark. The one-way tract had completed its cycle. The patients sat in a circle, their faces light, as if after a long sleep. No one cried. "You're free," she said. Her voice was hoarse, as if spoken by someone who had seen too much. They left one by one. Michael lingered, as if to speak, but only nodded. Grace stepped outside. The Portland rain fell fine and steady. She didn't open her umbrella, feeling each drop, how cold it was, and how it carried someone else's warmth. She knew, tomorrow it would be harder to bear it all, but today she could.